All right.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, you're live now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'm gonna do then is, see, it says I'm live on there, but on my end, it's still loading. So I needed to finish loading and then we'll start. We'll start. I mean, we'll basically just continue. All right, there we go. All right, people, I am back now. So I'm going to start with defining unforgiveness. And so let me share my screen again. All right. So for those of you who you hear this again, you've heard it before, but what is unforgiveness? Unforgiveness is a cold emotion that involves resentment, bitterness, and perhaps hatred, but all other negative affects or negative emotions that will come that can follow that. So it could be, you could be hurt, you could be just disappointed, you could be betrayed, whatever else you're feeling, but it leads you to avoiding the situation or avoiding the person, or that you want to retaliate or get some form of justice. That's unforgiveness. Okay. So there are ways to reduce unforgiveness without actually forgiving. There are ways you can actually reduce unforgiveness without actually going to forgiveness. And some of the ways, and so those are coping, the ways of coping, the ways of getting around the emotions of unforgiveness. And so, you can reduce the effect of unforgiveness. And one of the ways you do that is forbearance. Forbearance is a pro-relationship action that helps you release the negative feelings and desire for revenge, and it's similar to acceptance. So if you're religious, or if you're some kind of culture that believes that you just need to persevere in this thing, then unforgiveness affect is reduced, because you just feel like I'm going to be here the long run, so there's no need for me to stay in this unforgiveness. And so you forbear it, not that you forgive it, because some people sometimes mistake that. Not that you're forgiven it, you're just forbearing it. And if you have psychological defenses, such as you're denying that it happened, if you deny that it happened, um, you start projecting. You're projecting, meaning that whatever is happening to you, you project it on somebody else, or you minimize what happened. Somebody did something egregious, and you feel like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. They just kind of messed up. It's not a big deal. When you do that, it doesn't mean you forgave. It just means that you have found defenses around it, psychological defenses around it. And then another way of reducing unforgiveness is justice. You want to see justice done, and you actively seek justice. That would also reduce the affect of unforgiveness, or the effect of unforgiveness. So what we want to know is that we can go through life and have these coping mechanisms and have ways of coping in whatever situations that we're in, and that keeps us from forgiving, actually, from forgiveness. So now we want to look at what is forgiveness, and all through this class, where we will talk about forgiveness in detail. So this is almost just to get all of us in the same space, the same. Somebody, wait, I see they chat. Hold on. Yeah, just to get all of us in the same space. Please watch out for the chats. If I don't see it, because I can't seem to see what's on the chat, you can raise your hand to speak, or somebody else can help me with this. Uh, so forgiveness
Okay.
is a victim's internal choice. Either it's unconscious or deliberate, to relinquish, which another word for that is to give up on forgiveness, and to seek reconciliation with the offender if it's safe, prudent, or possible to do so. So you don't have to go to the second part of seeking reconciliation in order to forgive. But in order to forgive, it has to be either a conscious or unconscious choice that you make. And there are two types of forgiveness. There's a cognitive forgiveness and there's an emotional forgiveness. The cognitive forgiveness is a cognitive assent to forgiveness, which means that you just decide, I'm going to forgive this person. It's not worth it, and I'm going to forgive them. Or if you have a religious mandate to forgive, if there's a religious mandate to forgive, then you will say, okay, God said I should forgive, so I'm going to forgive this person. So there's that's a cognitive assent to forgiveness, or what we call cognitive forgiveness, that most people don't have a problem with, especially religious people. They don't have a problem with cognitive forgiveness, because that's what we're supposed to do. The second part of forgiveness, which is also as important and vital as the cognitive forgiveness, is the emotional forgiveness. Emotional forgiveness. The emotional forgiveness is that all of the negative emotions will be replaced with positive emotions. It means that emotionally you relieve yourself of the negative energy. You relieve yourself of the negative balance. And we'll talk more about this in upcoming slides. So, but just so you to know that there's two types of forgiveness. There's the cognitive forgiveness, which could be spiritual, which could be religious, which could be cultural, or whatever, a personal. And if that's the case, you forgive them in your head or in your mind, but you still get that, when you see them, you talk to them, you still have that, you still have those emotions. And then you need to go to the second layer of forgiveness, which is the emotional. Does that make sense? Can you guys hear me? Somebody tell me, because it says my internet. Are we good?
Yes, we're good.
Yes, we're
Okay.
good. Yeah.
Thank you. So I put this up here. This is a Christian component, and I always like this part because it says, it tells a story of forgiveness in such a powerful way. In such a powerful way. Please turn off your video if you can. All right. So forgiveness is the act of pardoning an offender. The Greek word of literally means to let go, as when a person does not demand payment for a debt. And so if you are religious and you're if you're a Christian, this is what you are told to do. What is what we are asked to do? Cancel debt, let it go, let it go. But most of the time, people let it go in their minds, but not in their emotions. And that is one of the reasons this workshop is really important. So forgiveness is not. What is it not? Forgiveness is not you saying, I forgive you. Okay, that's not it, because you can forgive without using specific words. It's not making a decision to forgive. It can involve a decision, but forgiveness is a process which takes time. Because remember, we're talking about the cognitive and the emotional. The cognitive is usually instantly. You can do that instantly. It's a decision you can make, but the emotional part sometimes takes time. It's not a quick fix. Forgiveness takes time, and progress may fluctuate, and that's another thing we're going to talk about today. Accepting what happened. It's not accepting what happened. It's not saying, oh, what happened is okay. You have to accept it. That's not what we're talking about. Forgiveness is not moving on. Just the fact that you moved on doesn't mean that you have forgiven. Forgiveness is not excusing, it's not condoning the act, it's not necessarily reconciliation. It is not justification for anything that's happened to you. It's not balancing the scales. When we say things like that time will heal all wounds, that's not true. because forgiveness is an active act, not a passive act. Abandoning resentment, I told you can do that and not have forgiven. We talked about that in reducing unforgiveness affect. Possessing positive feelings, the fact that you feel something positive towards that person, it could just mean that you could just learn how to do that and not necessarily have forgiven them. And that sounds a little bit convoluted, but it's not. We'll have those conversations later. And in order for unforgiveness to be in your life, it means that there is transgression. And we're using this word transgression because it is the word that captures what we're talking about today. Transgression occurs in the context of emotional relationship, okay? Ones that is affectively charged. So anytime there is an emotional relationship, potentially harmful events are perceived and emotionally reacted to. Anytime you are engaged in some kind of relationship that is an emotional one, there is therefore the opportunity for there to be transgression because things are emotionally charged. And so when things happen in that relationship, because look, especially if it's a dyad, if it's two people, a dyad is one of the most unstable relationships. Why? Because two people face to face is very difficult. It's also the most intimate, but it's very difficult. And because of the emotions that you're facing each other and you're transferring to each other, that is why people always try to get into triangles. Because when you're in a triangle, okay, look, just assume this is like just one, right? So when you're in a triangle, you can always channel your emotions to something else. So that's why people bring in all kinds of things into a diet. You could bring in a job, you could bring in a hobby to be the base of it. You could bring in religion, you could bring in an affair, you could bring in whatever that keeps you from you. Some people, even in relationships, in married relationships, people will bring their children, will be the triangle. So whatever keeps you from killing each other or getting striped or getting hurt in this dyad, you're going to find a triad or a triangle. So transgressions are acts that are wrong or moral or that morally offend us. So in a relationship, you can get hurt, but also unforgiveness can happen in systems. Unforgiveness can happen in systems. It can happen in cultural systems. It can happen in national systems. Governments can offend, because when you deem an act morally wrong, then you get hurt. You get the negative emotions that rises, and you begin to find justice, or you want to right the wrong. So transgressions are acts that wrong or morally offend or inflict psychological or physical pain. They can inflict psychological or physical pain or injury. Okay, so transgressions are objectively wrong or injurious. Okay, so when those things happen to us, there is the agency of our humanity wants to right that wrong, or we want to hold and withhold emotions and withhold positive emotions from the person or from that organization or from that whoever hurt us. And there are some transgressions that are just so injurious that we don't even know what to do, especially when you're powerless. So we're talking about a child who was raped. There was no power. for that child to defend himself or herself. You know, we're talking about people who have been abused and had no ways, and they didn't have the strength or the agency to be able to protect themselves. We're talking about governmental or laws that keep people oppressed. So those kind of things happen, and when there is transgression, unforgiveness would rise. Especially, and I need to finish that sentence, unforgiveness is the outcome unless there was an apology, there was an ownership of that wrong. That will clear the way for you to move forward. But in all of this, context matters. So let's look at some context. We're going to look at context in 3 ways, in 3 dimensions. We'll look at it from the personal context. Okay. We'll look at it from the emotional balance, which just means the emotional energy, the emotional balance of the relationship, and the interaction between your personal context and that relationship. You with me? Okay. So personal context is the first one. So some personality characteristics are particularly likely to influence how you react. So we don't all react to injury or transgression the same way. Your personality, some characteristic types will actually respond to things a little bit better. Let me see if I have a, no, I don't. Will actually respond to things a little bit better. Okay, so when we talk about personality, the agreeable personality is in particular because their bent is to get along with people. The agreeable personality will actually is more prone to forgiveness. Okay, it's more prone to forgiveness because this kind of people, they want to have relationship. They'll find a way to make peace. Okay. And then, but we're talking about the big 5 personality, neuroticism, for example, they might find it very difficult to engage. And I'm going to talk a little more about this in later slides. And we have people that will find it a little more difficult because that is just not their bent. They want to understand what happened. They're a little bit more contentious, and so they will just not be so easily forgive. And then some of the other things that can affect in personal context is your emotional intelligence. How emotionally intelligent are you? We'll want to look at that. And then we talk about emotional balance of the relationship. The emotional balance of the relationship is basically what is the emotional agency? What is the emotional energy in that relationship? Okay. What is driving that particular relationship? If there is more negative emotions, then there's going to be a problem. If there's more positive emotions, then forgiveness is not as difficult. So the more positive emotional balance you have in a relationship, the easier it is to forgive. And the more negative emotions there is in that relationship, the more difficult it becomes to forgive. And then we talk about the interaction between the personal context that we talked about and the relationship balance. So within any one relationship, people might behave in different ways, which we also need to understand. So somebody might come home and be very contentious, very angry, very hostile, and then they go to work and they're the most loving, most kind person. And you're trying to figure out, wait, what's going on here? So one particular relationship disposition, okay, doesn't mean that that's carried on to another context, into another area, into another system. So we need to understand that. So the relationship context is crucial to understanding whether unforgiveness and eventually forgiveness might occur after a transgression. Your personal context or your relationship balance, which is the relationship energy, and the interaction literally depends on where the environment is, or how you're functioning. We have people who say, look, at home or with this person, I can't be with myself. I can be myself, but with this other person, I can be myself. So you might be able to forgive more in one context and not the other context. Does that make sense? So the fact that you can forgive here doesn't mean that you can forgive in another place. So, or you might find it difficult. And that happens. Just an explanation of why that happens. When you say, well, I find it difficult to forgive this other person, but this person, I just don't know what's going on. Well, it means your personal context and your emotional balance, okay, are the one giving you, is the one working either for or against. The other thing we want to look at is your perception. Do you see my little image there? You know, the person said there's 4, and the other one says, no, there's 3. Depends on how you're looking at it. It depends on the lens through which you see. What the victim's perception of the event is very important. So perception of event is almost everything, because it's how you see it. If you don't see it the way I see it, then we wouldn't be on the same page. So potentially harmful events must pass through perceptual lenses. For example, you may perceive a comment, a negative comment, as funny, and respond to that with laughter or indifference. So basically, when that happens, you avoid the unforgiveness cycle. You're not even in that space. Somebody says something, you think, oh, wow, that's funny, because that's the lens through which you're saying. Somebody else will listen to the exact same statement, and they perceive that statement as a personal attack, and they would respond defensively. And which is why sometimes, even in our world, even in our social spaces, it looks as if we're inhabiting parallel universes, because we have on different lenses. Okay, and so the perception of the event is important, and to either you get into the unforgiveness cycle. Then we look at the initial emotional reaction. So if the person does not perceive the transgression as benign, if they don't think it's benign, they will react emotionally. If you think there's something to it, you will react emotionally. And if a person perceives the transgression as offensive, that meaning that it violates your moral norms, then you would respond or react with anger. Anger gives rise to aggression or retaliation or hostility towards the offender. And anger can also trigger either coping mechanisms, a passive one or an active one. So when you're in the throes of anger, okay, hostility, whatever you want to call that, whatever you're feeling, you might immediately, if you're resilient, activate your coping mechanisms. And some of those coping mechanisms could involve, I'm not going to talk to them anymore because I need to protect myself. I'm not going to go there anymore. I will unfriend them on Facebook or whatever social media. I'm not going to. It immediately activates the coping mechanism. Now, the thing about the brain is it does, or the amygdala especially, it doesn't know the difference between a real active event or a perceived one. It reacts the same way. So, or an imagined one. So you might be getting robbed, and the amygdala will kick into action, right? Because you're in danger. So your stress response system kicks into action. But let's say you were you're watching some kind of movie that's very emotional for you, and you seem to be in danger. It could also kick that up. The stress response system can also kick in, even though you are not literally being robbed. And so it doesn't understand the difference between the real thing and a perceived act. So in the same way, when we're talking about forgiveness, a perceived hurt, even if it didn't really happen, but if it's perceived, it would also produce the same thing. It would produce fear, or it would produce anger. And if there's fear in that, fear will produce avoidance, okay? And it just leads to those active or passive defense mechanisms. So either you actually got hurt, or you thought you got hurt, or you thought somebody offended you. The same thing the results are the same. I hope that understands. Does that make sense? Type in the chat and let me know if you're with me, if you're flowing with me. Let me know.
Lots of yeses. Lots of yeses.
Okay, thank you, because for some reason I can't see my chat. All right. And so this is important. So then let's look at the path to forgiveness. What is the pathway to forgiveness? Well, what is a path to it? So forgiveness is an internal choice. It's an internal choice. You have to make a choice to forgo avoidance. You don't want to avoid this anymore. You're not seeking revenge. You're not trying to, just reconcile with this person. That's not what we want. It's what we want is a choice to produce more positive state in your life. Okay, more positive state in your life. So this is it, and you can facilitate this by events that produce more positive emotional states. Okay, that is incongruent with unforgiveness. So basically what I'm saying is you have to do things that don't feel unforgiveness. So if you want forgiveness, you have to move towards forgiveness. So whatever you move towards, you give the energy to whatever you move towards. So when we are seeking forgiveness, you have to make a choice to move away from unforgiveness and everything that is fueling the unforgiveness energy, and move towards a forgiveness energy. Okay, so the positive resolution of this emotional dissonance reduces rumination and desire for revenge. Okay, so you know what an emotional dissonance reduces? Rumination and desire for revenge. Rumination is how you think about it and keep thinking about it, and you just feast on it and you feast on it, and the more you think about it, the more you get triggered. Okay, the more you get triggered. So it is important to know another thing, that forgiveness is recursive. What does that mean? That means that you might literally arrive at a place of genuine forgiveness. When you've gone to the cognitive and the emotional, you might actually arrive at a place of forgiveness. You might get there, okay? And then sometimes in the future or later, somehow, you start ruminating again about what happened. And once you start ruminating again about what happened, you get yourself right back into the place of unforgiveness. So sometimes this forgiveness has to be an active process, an ongoing process. So achieving forgiveness is repetitive. You can't just say, oh, I forgave them, that's last time, and I'm done with it. Anytime those negative energy comes, anytime you're ruminating and you begin to think, then you go through the process again. And today we'll show you what the process is, or what the process are. So 5 steps for granting forgiveness. You know, give me a minute. I'm not sure I want to talk about that right now. Yeah. So consequences of forgiveness. Consequences of forgiveness. Unforgiveness declines, and the motivation to have a good relationship increases. So if forgiveness is granted, several consequences will ensue. And those are, you are going to increase the forgiveness affect, unforgiveness will decline or decreases, and the motivation to have a good relationship will increase, okay, or a better relationship. Now, understand that not everybody you forgive, you have to get back into relationship with them. So these are for people when that is possible. When we're just telling you what is possible when forgiveness is active, okay? And if reconciliation occurs, okay, that only depends if it's safe for that to happen, if it's prudent for that to happen, and if it's possible for that to happen. I'm not of the opinion that you don't have to reconcile with everybody you forgive. I think that reconciliation is possible, but make sure that it's safe, make sure that it's prudent for you for forgiveness to happen, and make sure that it is possible to act. If those 3 things if those 3 ingredients are available to you, then it is possible to go into relationship. But if not, if it's not safe, if it's not prudent, and if it's not possible, then you can forgive. And like we say, my kids would say, keep it stepping. Okay. So other things change as consequences of forgiveness. So one of the things we've talked about the balance. You know, we've used that word balance, and another word you can use for that is energy. You know, and so in positively balanced relationship, when you're good relationship, okay, and you go through and you forgive, what happens is now you're more you have your energy is more positive and stable. You go from that, oh my God, I don't know what's going on, all of that, you know, it stabilizes you. But if you are in a negative balanced relationship, okay, and you move towards forgiveness, well, your perception becomes less negative, the energy becomes less negative, and it also brings you to stability. So no matter what the relationship is, either it is a positive relationship or positive energy relationship or a negative one, once you move both or all the people involved move towards forgiveness, 2 things happen. Either the positivity increases or the negativity decreases. But in both contexts, there's stability. The person doing the forgiveness, the forgiver, becomes more optimistic about the relationship and the future for both the forgiven and the forgiver actually becomes more hopeful. It actually becomes more hopeful. This is one of the, so those are consequences of forgiveness. So I introduced those 3 components earlier on. The first one was that personal context, and we talked about personality types. So in this slide, we want to look at those personality types. So the first one we want to look at is conscientiousness. Those are people who are very we're very disciplined, and they're very careful about life. They're very thorough in what they do. They want to know the details about things. They're very conscientious. And then we have the agreeableness, and you can look this up. It's called the Big Five personality. And if you're really into personality, which you should be, because it really will help you in your relationships, not only should you know this Big Five, also go and take the 16 personality Myers-Briggs. But you can go online to 16personality.com, and you can actually get your personality types. So this ones are the Big Five. So that's like the base for all of the personalities that we have. So then we have the agreeable type, agreeableness. And those are more trusting people, and they're very helpful. They're more trusting, they're very helpful. Okay. Then we have neuroticism, which are they're very anxious. They're just naturally very anxious and just pessimistic. So they're anxious, they're pessimistic, they're waiting for the other shoe to drop at all times. It's a personality type, and then there is openness, and that is what we talk about openness. We're talking about being open to more experiences. They're more spontaneous, and they're very good imagination. These are people to have on your team. Actually, you should have all the personality types on your team. And then we have the extroversion, which people call extroverts, but this is extroversion. And these are more sociable types. They're more fun-loving types. In forgiveness, though, we found that the agreeableness, this is a factor that lends itself to getting along with others. While extroversion concerns itself with sources of energy, the pursuit of interaction with others, agreeableness actually concerns one orientation to another. This person wants to engage. They're relationship people. Okay. So, when we're thinking about traits of these people, this altruism, trust, modesty, humbleness, patience, moderation, tact, politeness, kindness, loyalty, unselfishness, helpfulness, sensitivity, and it goes on and on and on and on for this agreeable type. So people who are high in agreeableness, they tend to be well liked, they tend to be respected and sensitive to the needs of others. They might have a few enemies here and there, but they're affectionate people. So if you happen to be if your a personality type happens to be agreeableness, you will find it easier to forgive. You'll find it so much easier. It won't even be like it's like, okay, I forgive you, let's go on. But if you are neuroticism, for example, you will struggle with unforgiveness. You will struggle because you're naturally more pessimistic. Does that make sense? You're naturally more pessimistic. You're more anxious. Your personality is more anxious, is more pessimistic. And so you will struggle with that and everything else in between. So from one extreme of agreeableness and neuroticism, everything else, the more open you are, the more you find it easier to forgive. All right. So then we talk about emotional intelligence. I told you I was going to talk about this on this slide. So emotional intelligence is defined as the ability to understand one's own and others' emotional state, to actively regulate your emotion in others and your emotion and others, and to utilize emotion in decision making, planning, and motivating action. So when we're talking about the emotional IQ or what EQ, we're talking about how do you know how well do you make decisions based on understanding of emotional context. All right. So people with high emotional intelligence can discern interpersonal situations and control their behavior to fit that, so that it can have a more social, positive interaction. So when you walk into a situation and you see that somebody's not having a good day, for example, it can even happen in your family. You know, somebody with a high IQ walks into a situation, you can assess that maybe your child is not really doing well today. It might not be the time to start having a really high level conversation with them, you know. So you're able to discern the emotional context of any situation. And when you're able to do that, it's easier for you to make fewer emotional errors. Okay, so high emotionally intelligent people find it easy to forgive because they do not move in. They have fewer unforgiveness cases, incidents, you know, and they also know how to solve issues. They're quicker at resolutions. They're able to find answers to situations. People high in emotional intelligence, you know, have a wide range of strategies that they can use when they are in complex situations. So it is important to the more you build your emotional intelligence, the easier for you to have more positive relationships. And also, if you are the transgressor, so emotional intelligence is important if you're also the transgressor. So emotionally intelligent individuals who transgress, okay, against others have a greater capacity to understand their victim's emotional state. So even if you are the transgressor and you do something wrong, if you have a high emotional intelligence, what happens is you can put yourself in the other person's shoes. You're going to be able to say, oh my God, what I did was wrong. You know, why did I do that? You know that it's, and if the other person is angry at you, you would own it. You know, you would own it. You're like, okay, I did that, and I have to find ways to make amends. I have to find a way to discuss this with the victim. So transgressors who are unaware of their victim's emotional state are lower in emotional intelligence. So the next thing we want to look at is empathy. Empathy. So if your personal context, if you're talking about, you can empathize with people, and empathy is how we walk in others' shoes. If you're high in empathy, then you're able to forgive easier. When you have a predisposition towards empathy, you are either you're the transgressor or the offended. You're able to resolve it, you know, faster. Now, narcissism. If your personal context, we talked about it in the big five. If narcissism, so any personality disposition, okay, related to impairment in empathy should be expected to inhibit forgiveness. So any personality that doesn't promote everything that we've talked about will inhibit forgiveness. So narcissism has been linked to reduction in empathy. So the more narcissistic you are, we expect you not to be able to forgive. Other one is not, to find it difficult to forgive, not because you cannot forgive, but you find it difficult to forgive. All right, so pride. Pride, you know, is one that we want to look at because it can hamper forgiveness, okay? If there's pride involved, it actually leads to you holding grudges, okay? And a desire to save face. So when pride is involved, instead of asking for forgiveness or instead of owning what you've done, if pride is involved, then there will be grudge holding and there will be a desire to save face. You know, prideful people might more easily sustain injury or offense. When there's pride involved, you might be more susceptible to injury or offense. So somebody might say something that maybe was not even meant to be injurious to you, but because there is a pride, there's this pride in you, then that actually makes it more difficult for you to forgive, but it also makes you more susceptible to injury and offense, if that makes sense. And then we'll look at guilt and shame. And these are really important, especially when people struggle with unforgiveness. This is to explain to you what's going on. So when we have guilt and shame, it is interesting because shame is a negative affect. Actually, they're both negative affects, but shame says there's something wrong with me. So the shame internalizes their failures. It's almost a permanent damage because shame says I am bad. Guilt is very specific on what they did wrong. So guilt will say, I did something bad. I did something wrong. Shame will say, I am wrong. I am bad. Okay? I am bad. So shame experiences are more likely to result in the transgressor's unwillingness to confess, the desire to self-protect, and a tendency to isolate. Because when you feel that you were bad and there's something innately wrong with you, even if you either commit the offense or you're the offended, you're going to withdraw, you want to save face, and you will just be unwilling to reveal yourself to others. So shame proneness will also result in relational destructive responses. So there can be anger, there can be bitterness. All of these things will encroach in your emotional space and keep you in that space. So experiences resulting in guilt, on the other hand, I am wrong or I am damaged, is different from I experienced something that was bad or I did something wrong. When that happens, so when there's guilt as opposed to shame, it's easier to forgive. It's easier to reach out. It's easier to have positive balance. So we don't want shame. And so if you are in the shame space, we need to get help. So religion is another personal context. Religion is a personal context because what happens in religion is that the more we're involved in our religion, it brings sometimes open-mindedness, because a lot of religions talk about forgiveness. It talks about forgiveness, and so there are rituals that go that follow forgiveness. I don't know if we're going to have time today, but I do have a book on forgiveness, and the second part of that forgiveness, it's what I call the forgiveness portals, and they're rituals that you can do in order to attain the space. Okay, so one of the rituals is baptism, which is it's a religious word, but however, the very idea of going inside of being dipped in water and coming back out can be a way of I'm burying the past and I'm coming up anew. So you don't need somebody to, you don't need somebody to baptize you or anything. If you're talking about forgiveness, you can literally find a place after you've done the work, and go, you get in and you come out and you in yourself and you say, this is the new me coming out. It's a ritual. It's a way to say to yourself that you are you are a different person and you're not carrying that load anymore. All right. I should give you guys a break now. It's past 9 o'clock here. So why don't we take a 5 minutes break and then you come back for the last hour. Class, you with me? So we'll take a quick break.
Yes, we are.
All right. So take a quick break, a 5 minute break, and then we shall return. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I think it's almost 5 minutes, or it is 1 more minute, I think. Oh, I'm looking at your questions now. I mean, at the chat. I'm looking at the chat. Someone said, how do you recover from a narcissistic personality? Pride is a big one. I like your explanation of it. All right, thank you. Okay. All right, thank you guys. Somebody said, I think I logged in an hour late. Sorry. You can watch the video. All right. Okay, we need to start. We need to come back. So are you guys there? Let me know if you're there.
I'm here. I've done that stuff I said I was going to do.
Okay. So Binka, you get 2 minutes to do what you need. I mean, you get a few minutes to do what you need to do. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good evening and welcome to this beautiful session on forgiveness. I mean, from your questions and the interactions in the chat, I know that we have been hitting the places, that we talked about when we were marketing this, that it is with forgiveness that you actually get an opportunity to move into freedom. We would like to take this further by inviting you to our next program. I mean, this is about you. This forgiveness session is indeed about you. And we would like to invite you to the one that you can bring in your family members and come and learn together and come and get the skills required to move to the next level. I mean, that's just what it is. You can imagine the things that you're hearing from us tonight, the things that Dr. Marino is sharing about forgiveness, about release, about emotional intelligence, about guilt, about shame. And we know that this year has really dealt, 2020 has given us a double whammy, if you know what I mean, just bombarded us with different things. And each and every member of our family has, how do you say, they've experienced these events in different ways. They've experienced it in different ways, so please, the session is open. It's a group coaching session with Dr. Marino. So please come in with members of your family. It is a paid event. It is a paid event. It's a regular paid event amongst our programs, but we've included it in the end of year sales, and the prices are off, everybody. The prices are off. You can come in for this for free because we believe in building healthy communities. We believe in healthy families, and there is nothing that can, communicate that more than wellness in our minds, wellness, in our souls, wellness in everything that is around us. So guys, that is the link. Here. I'm going to put the link in the chat. It's next week, Saturday, December 19th. It's 4 p.m. West African time here in Nigeria. It's 3 p.m. in London. It's 7 a.m. for those of you on the Pacific coast in America. I'll put the link in the group. So please, 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 please register. Bring members of your family, key decision makers, tell everybody, tell your friends, those who you have familial connections with, let them get in on this group coaching session, and let's come equipped with skills that would release us into freedom, that will release us into healing, that would make us and enable us to focus appropriately and create, a great 2021. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bims. I appreciate that. And so yeah, so put the link in the chat box so people are aware of it. So they can sign up. I see a question that says, Dr. Marino, how do you forgive someone who continues to hurt you, especially if the abuse is in the spirit? I don't understand the abuse in the spirit.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not a physical abuse, it's not an emotional or mental abuse, but it's something that's spiritual. And you have dreams of this person coming to abuse you and hurt you and continue to drain you. And you know that it's actually happening. So how do you forgive that person?
Okay. Oh my goodness, my goodness. All right.
Well, this is a tough one.
Yes, it is. And well, I'll just say this because there's question and answer time towards the end, but I'll just say this now. If it's a spiritual thing, it's a spiritual issue, it has to be addressed spiritually. So I do not even think that the question is forgiveness. I think we have to deal with the spiritual realm with a spiritual armor of spiritual tools. And and so hold on to that. At the end, hopefully we can get back to that. All right.
Okay.
And I see a lot of questions now. So let me finish and then I'll take the question, okay? And also somebody wants the YouTube link. Excellent. We will share that with you. So are we all here? Are we ready to finish? Stay with me. All right. Thank you, Priscilla. I can see that. Yes. All right, cool. Let me share my screen again and we will move on. I hope that I think we stopped here. We stopped here. Perception of events. And we talked about this. I introduced this at the beginning of the slide, of the PowerPoint. So perceptions of the event is basically the way you perceive what happens, right? But we want to talk about two types of people. Highly sensitive people or highly sensitive persons. They're likely to perceive more pain or offense from an interpersonal transgression than less sensitive people. Highly sensitive people report sensitivity or intolerance of emotions, situations, environments, and other people. They're very sensitive. So the higher you are on the scale of sensitivity, the easier it is for you to get hurt. And it's also the increased reaction may also make forgiveness difficult and sometimes less likely. So please mute yourself. Okay. So highly sensitive people are more reactive. They react react very strongly to transgression. Remember, we talked about what transgression is. And they are so in tune with their own sense of fragility, really, that they want to be protective, and so you can say something that you might not really is not meant to offend, but because they're so sensitive, they pick up things easier than people. Now, high sensitive people might be focused on the impact of the stimuli on themselves. So it's the way they feel. How is this making me feel? It's not so much what the person even did. It's the impact of that. Whether emotional impact, maybe it's anger, it's whatever. It's just not making them feel well. They might even have physiological impacts where they have constant headaches and maybe stomach upset. Things begin to happen to them, and it also makes it even difficult for them to forgive. Individuals with high HSP, as we'll call it, also tend to be more likely to be introverted. Okay. And so because of that, sometimes you're not sure if they're just introverted or they've been offended. Does that make sense? We're not sure if they've been offended or this is just them being introverted. Okay. So we need to, if you are that person, you need to you need to know that you have the proclivity to being offended. And one of the things I want you to do is to begin to seek ways to foster your own sense of relatability. So begin to understand how, actually, if you develop some of the things I talked about earlier, like emotional IQ, you develop capacities for empathy, you developed all those things, it might actually help you. Now, there are also people who are sensitive to rejection. Okay, sensitivity tolerance is the anxious preoccupation with the potential that somebody is going to not love you, is going to leave you, is going to do something wrong to you. That's you're projecting it on the people around you. You're expecting it. So people sensitive to interpersonal rejection, they are more likely to interpret just negative events as offensive and harmful. And they might also engage in like anger and fear and related attempts to prevent the rejection. So when somebody is literally just yelling at you or they are annoyed at you or angry at you, but you haven't done anything, it is their way. That person might be sensitive to rejection. It's their way of pushing you away before you reject them, because they know that they're going to be rejected. And the people who are highly sensitive to rejection are actually said to be higher in unforgiveness. Okay? So the effect of high sensitivity to rejection, okay, impacts your ability to forgive, or may impact. Well, let me just, there's nothing, this is not an exact science. So I wanted to talk about this because a lot of people do it. So interpersonal, so passive responses. So one of the, we want to look at two. We want to look at rumination. Rumination makes unforgiveness more unforgiveness more likely and forgiveness less likely. Okay. So rumination is basically you, like I talked about earlier, mulling over a situation or an offense in your mind, and it leads to a greater desire for a negative act. So it could be revenge, it could be getting back, it could be more aggression on your part, it could be passive aggressive, whatever. So the more you ruminate on it, the more you want to stay away. Every time, and we in trauma, we have trauma courses, and I also give trauma workshops. In trauma, we say that if it's hysterical, it's historical. If it's hysterical, it's historical. Basically, that says that if there is negative energy to it, if you find yourself highly reacting to something, there's a history to it. There's a history to it. So when you ruminate on things, sometimes you might ruminate on stuff from 20 years ago and 30 years ago. What then happens is it gives rise to the desire for either to avoid that situation or to seek revenge or to just be more aggressive. Now, the second passive responses that you can have is dissipation. Dissipation is the ability to release the anger and frustration caused by the harm. So we're not even talking about you forgiving the person, but dissipation is your ability to just not, to release the anger and let it go. So if a victim of an interpersonal transgression, that means person to person, responds with sadness, and then ruminates not only about the transgression, but about how sad that made them, about how depressed that made them. Forgiveness will be difficult. Depression reduces the victim's energy level and makes the work of forgiveness less likely because it's hard work. Forgiveness is hard work. Remember, we're talking about two types of forgiveness: cognitive forgiveness and emotional forgiveness. And somebody just talked about the spiritual component, but we have cognitive forgiveness, emotional forgiveness. Sometimes you can forgive it cognitively and not have forgiven emotionally. So if forgiveness is work, it's not a one-time thing. Okay. And so I want to talk about this. These are some of the things that would help you not get into a place where you're in unforgiveness. It doesn't heal the past. It just helps you get to the place where you're no longer a victim of unforgiveness. Remember, forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for you. And forgiveness is also to create an environment around yourself that is nourishing. Watson said, give me any child. It's a behavioral classic. He said, give me any child, or give me all these children from any place in the world. Any place in the world. It can be black, white, yellow, whatever. They can be from any socioeconomic class. They can be anybody. Give them to me, and I will change their lives by changing their environment. I can change their lives by changing their environment. So what that means is if we can change our own space, if we can create a space around ourselves that is nurturing, a place around ourselves that is positive, has positive balance, then we can live better lives. But when we're in a place of war, we're in a place where everything is so negatively charged, it's not good for the children that are in that environment. It's not good for you you're in that environment. And it literally is a gift that keeps on giving. So the more negative balance you have in your space, the more negative consequences you're going to receive. And the more positive you have, the more positive. So this is how it goes. So this is why we want to look at this 5 components. We want to look at empathy. We've talked about it before. So developing empathy, it actually strengthens you. Empathy is the ability to understand and feel the experience, the cognitive and affect of other people, or experiences of other people, without necessarily having been in that situation. So I can understand it cognitively, I can understand it emotionally, and I can walk in their shoes. So the higher you are in empathy, the more likely you are to forgive, and the less likely you are to be wounded. So the next one is apology. Research has linked offering an apology, expressing remorse, and conveying regret to improved judgment of positive balance for the other people, not just for you, but for the person that you offended. So apology saves the day. Honestly, people, just learning to say a genuine, I am sorry, I shouldn't have done that, can change the environment, can change the space. All right, humility. Remember, we talked about pride being one of the factors that inhibits forgiveness. Well, humility will assist the forgiveness process by enabling a humble victim to remember incidents in the past in which he or she might have transgressed against another. Humility reminds you of your own humanity. So somebody wronged you. Humility is the cognitive effective experience of avoiding your self-focus by supplanting it with other focus. So humility is seeing yourself in a true light. realizing that, but the grace of God, or realizing that that could be me. I could be the transgressor, and choosing to respond based on our humanity, based on our own commonality. I too have harmed others. I too have harmed others, rather than our differences. Look what you did for me. Now, there are some offenses that there should be no commonality, like rape and all of these things that happen. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about in your daily lives of interpersonal lives, when you have been wounded as either as a child or as an adult in ways that are so egregious. We have to get to the point where we find a relationship. Okay, we find a corrective relationship that can help us heal those wounds. So I would suggest finding contact us. We can help you get with a therapist, or get with a therapeutic coach who can help you walk that journey. Now, optimism is another one. Optimism is a tendency to attribute life's event to positive and less despairing causes. So an optimistic person is not always waiting for the shoe to drop. Okay, the tendency to view life with optimism will assist you in making less permanent and damaging offenses. Hopefully that makes sense. And the last one I want to look at here is hope. Hope. And these are factors that have been studied in the field. There's a whole field of forgiveness out there. These are factors that have been studied. These are things that help you. And so if you are a religious person, if you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, whatever your religion is, a lot of religions also emphasize some of this. And it helps you live a full life. So hope. Do you know people who of higher hope tend to set higher hope goals for themselves? People with lower hope individuals tend set lower hope goals for themselves. But people who are high in hope have a higher tendency to forgive and let go than those who don't. So we have to work on increasing our hope, our levels of hope. I also wanted to talk about this briefly before we move on to the paths of forgiveness. One of the things that I want to talk about in forgiveness, when it talks about the neurobiology of it, because in this particular workshop, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. One of the things, unforgiveness, I just want to emphasize that unforgiveness will keep your bodies in the state of high alert. It will keep your body in a state of high alert, because for you to be in unforgiveness means that you are in a high state of stress, a high state of trauma, a high state of negative affect. And when you're in that state, what has happened is that your stress response system is activated. And without going into details about that, when your limbic system thinks that there is danger, when it thinks there's danger, when it thinks that we have something, there are stimuli coming at us that we're not prepared for, what it does is it starts to protect you. It wants to fight. It wants to flee. It wants to do something about what danger is. And so it starts to secrete a hormone called cortisol. Of course, in the beginning, you have you do have adrenaline that's pumping, but adrenaline doesn't last too long. So there's this cortisol that's secreted in you, and cortisol by itself is good. Cortisol by itself is what helps you sleep better. It's what helps you process, proteins and carbs in your body. It by itself, it's good, but in excess, it actually turns against you. And so when you keep unforgiveness in your body, and one of the ways it impacts you adversely is by keeping you in a state of high alert. And then you start getting all of the consequences of that. Might impact impact your metabolism. It might impact your sleep pattern. It might impact it actually impact reproduction. Some people find it difficult if they are in this state of unforgiveness or high negative stressors. They find it difficult to have babies. You know, there's all kinds of things. Some people start having physiological impact. And so when this unforgiveness is in your body, it's a negative stressor that the body will react to. And if you want your body to, so what I'm trying to say is it's no longer a choice for you to forgive if you want to live a life that is wholesome, a life that is peaceful, and a life that is productive. So you would have to get rid of that unforgiveness by doing the work of calming things down and doing the work of forgiveness. And there's also the last thing I'm going to say is our nucleus accumbens, which houses our what we call the happiness gauge. So there's a part of your body of your brain, and one of the reasons that drugs of abuse are so effective when people take drugs and things like that is because it stimulates the nucleus accumbens, and which causes the body to be euphoric. Which causes you to just want to feel good, and so we call it the happiness gauge. And so your happiness gauge goes from miserable to happy, and it wants to be happy, it wants to be engaged. So what happens to your brain? I don't want to get into a lot of things. What happens to either you being happy or you being in a state of funk is where that gauge is. Where is that gauge at any given time? If you are in a state of unforgiveness, emotional unforgiveness, because most of us have a problem with the cognitive. If you're in a state of emotional unforgiveness, you will find it difficult to be on the happiness gauge, on the happiness side, where things are okay, or pleasure side, where things are okay. You find yourself, mostly tending to the miserable or not feeling so good side of your brain. All right. So what does this mean? What are some of these implications? Number one, learn about your personality. Okay, learn about personality, because the more you know who you are, the more you can get better, and the more you can develop the goodness in your personality, and which will help you, be able to ward off some of this injuries or some of this transgression. Number two, resolve problems. So learn conflict resolutions, learn how to communicate. Communication is vital in any relationship, and learn what problem solving intervention looks like. Okay. We also want to, reduce chronic stress. Look, it's easier to maintain something positive than to try to heal from something that's distressful. Okay, and so what we want to do is, either personally, or if you're with your spouse, or with your children, or with any relationships that you have, you want to reduce chronic distress. You don't want to get to the place where you're already in such a place of distress. So modify your interactions around forgiveness. If you can forgive and confess and forgive past wrongs. When in the studies, especially with couples, we found that the easiest way to move into life satisfaction is through forgiveness. If the parties can decide to confess and forgive, reduce rumination, stop thinking about it, and modify our emotional reactions to provocations. If we, and of course, change the, the destructive attributions. That means I'm attributing this to something negative. We don't want to do that. One of the other things that we can do is family therapy. And that's one of the things that we talked about. That's why we're offering that family healing clinic that we're doing next week. Family therapy. Many issues involved, involving the dynamics. It's in the context of family that we get wounded. That's where most of the wounds start, in the context of family. I believe that the family is the DNA of life. That's where the DNA of God is. That's in the context of families that we learn everything, because that's where we learn our relationships. So if we can fix the family, if we can fix that, not only are you going to give yourself a gift, we're going to give our children gifts. If we can create an environment where our children can thrive, then we are not only giving them a gift for their future, we're giving them a gift for now. And then couples therapy, make sure you get yourself into, if this is with you and a partner, it works, get there. And then we also individual therapy or coaching. It doesn't have to be therapy, it could also be coaching. We do therapeutic coachings, and so you can go into coaching or into therapy if you're struggling with unforgiveness towards somebody. People struggling with unforgiveness with their parents, that long time ago, unforgiveness through the system, unforgiveness, all kinds of things can happen. And so you literally can bring the unforgiveness into those sessions. And then of course group therapy. So 5 steps into granting forgiveness. Give me a minute, guys. One of the things, remember that slide that I saw that I moved the last time? I need to bring it back to this slide. So give me 1 second. Let me get it, and I will get right back to you. Can you guys see me? I mean, yeah?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, good. All right, so I need to find that other slide. So some reason it got itself moved up where it doesn't belong. Isn't that like life, right? Okay, I found it. So anytime you're in a place that you don't belong, it makes life complicated, guys. Always find your belonging, find your place.
That's powerful.
I was just a freebie, right?
Yeah, that was powerful. Mm-hmm.
Always have to find your place. Thank you. All right, so I'm back. Let me share my screen again. Sorry for that. And we'll move on. All right. So 5 steps for granting forgiveness. So the first one is acknowledge the anger and the hurt caused by the clearly identified specific offenses. This is important because I have seen people, clients and members who say they're hurt, but they can't even remember what the offense was. It's difficult to forgive something that you don't remember. So maybe forgiveness is not your issue. If you don't remember the offense, maybe forgiveness is not your issue. You need to work on the emotions. So sometimes we're talking about forgiveness, man, it's not. If you don't remember what was done to you, it may be unforgiveness is not what you need to deal with. You want to deal with the aftermath of that. And the second one is borrow revenge and any thought of inflicting harm as repayment or punishment to the offender. And if you are spiritual or religious, I'm a Christian, so I'll talk from that perspective. One of the things that God says is that You do not have to fight your own, the vengeance is mine. And the way I see that is, if I plot my own revenge, it cannot be as fantastic as if God plots it. I'm sorry, like he can take the revenge for you. So I don't need to do that. And that's if you're coming from my school of thought. You might not be there. So that's okay. All right. But in order for you to move away from unforgiveness into forgiveness, you cannot hold revenge and the thought of inflicting harm as repayment. That does not move you into forgiveness. It moves you more into unforgiveness, and then it activates the part of the brain that says that you are in trauma, and then you begin to injure yourself. We do not want that. So consider the offender's perspective. We've talked a lot about this today. Try to understand, why did they do this? Why did they do that? And look, I know some of you will look at me and say, look, I have been so wounded that I cannot look at their side. And if you're really at the end of this, really struggling with forgiving, I need you to contact me. We need to talk after this. Okay? And so consider the offender's perspective. Try to understand from their own attitude. You hear that saying all the time, that statement all the time. Hurt people hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. That's the gold, standard. Hurt people hurt people. The person who is perpetrating the hurt on you, I can almost guarantee that that person has been injured too. And when you've been injured, it's difficult to be the person you want them to be. So if we consider that from their perspective and say, you know what? I hope they get help, but I will take care of myself. I remove their power over me. I cannot allow this situation to keep me stagnated. And there's so many ways people have offended us. Is it the spouse that said that they were going to be with you forever and they decided not to be with you? Is it the parent that was supposed to love and care and decided not to do so? Is it the job that was supposed to hire that said they were going to keep you and not fire you, but you did nothing wrong and you were terminated? Is it the pastor or the minister in whatever capacity that molested you? There's so many, and it keeps on going and going. There's so many ways you people are offended, people are hurt. But at the end of the day, it's a gift that keeps on giving, because even though they hurt you the one time, they still maintain the power over you for the rest of your life if you don't get rid of that. You are hooked to your unforgiveness. You are hooked to your offender in unforgiveness. You are hooked to your offender. And when I'm hooked to my offender, it's as if they are constantly molesting me or hindering me for the rest of my life. So what unforgiveness does is it unhooks you from the offender. It unhooks you. Forgiveness will unhook you from that offender. It doesn't mean what they did was right. It doesn't mean what they did was okay. It doesn't mean that you're giving violence to that at all. It just means that you are tired of being tired. You are tired of them taking, your joy and taking all the stuff that you have. So a day you have to make a decision that I am no longer going to be that person. Because especially now that you know that a lot of things begin to work against you because of the offense that you didn't commit. Somebody did it to you. Somebody did that to you. And all of a sudden you have having problems sleeping. You're gaining weight, you're losing weight, you're breaking out. So all these things happening to you because of them. So today we want to decide enough is enough. They cannot have that power over me anymore. I know better. I am going to do better. I do not say that what they've done to me was okay. I do not say that the fact that you did this was right, but I am saying that I am enough. I am enough. I also can be loved. I also can be taken care of. I am enough. And today, that's what we're going to do. We're not going to allow our perpetrators to continue to do that. You're going to get unhooked today. So decide to accept the hurt without unloading it on the offender, passing it back and forth and magnifies it. You know, she did it. I should have said that. I should have said that. You know, have you been in a place where somebody hurt you and you're like thinking about, I should have done this. Why did they do that? Oh my God. You know, people get stuck with this for years, 30, 40 years. What I want you to do is accept the fact that they hurt you. Like, just sit with it. Sit with it. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. They hurt you. Stop bypassing this point in forgiveness, especially if you're from the evangelical Christian world. You don't even want to look at it. Oh, yes, no problem. Oh, I forgive them in the name of Jesus. Oh, yes. And you're still hurting. You're still hurting. No. You have to mourn that. You have to accept it. Sit in it. Accept the fact that you grew up in a messy, dysfunctional home. You don't have to make excuses for it. It's the way it is. And mourn that fact. Let it wash over you. Write a letter. Do something. This is what happened. This is what I expected. Some people are mad at God. Tell him that. He's not, he can take it. But you can't keep moving on as if nothing has happened. I have clients that are dealing with things from years and years ago, because we just keep moving on. We just say, okay, wasn't a big deal. Okay, wasn't a big deal. And the truth is, if you don't, whatever you don't deal with, your children will deal with it. And that's not a good legacy to pass on. You take care of it now because they didn't ask to be born. You take care of it now so that they don't have to deal with it. The war, the test or the war that you don't win now, they will live to fight it again. And E, extend compassion and goodwill to the offender if it's okay, if it's safe. If not, you don't have to, you don't have to, what I mean by if it's safe is you don't have to physically go there. You don't have to physically, do all that. It's all in the state of your heart. If it's safe, you can, and you want to, you can, but you don't have to. In your heart, release this, let your emotion release it. And every time you think about it, ruminating about it, you have to go through the step of forgiveness again. Okay. So there's these phases that I want to take you guys through. And so during phase 1, you improve your understanding of injustice, and we've already done that. And then you have the decision phase. That's the phase where you gain a deeper understanding of what forgiveness is and make the decision to choose or reject forgiveness. Hopefully, you've done that on this course. And then the work phase is what we're going to do. During the work phase, you will start to understand the offender in a new way, which will allow for positive feelings towards the offender of yourself. And the deepening stage phase is you will decrease the negative emotion associated with the injustice, and you may find meaning in the experience. This is where you want to be, in the meaning part. In fact, this whole thing of post-traumatic growth is finding meaning in the experience. And one of the reasons we get traumatized and we stay in trauma is because our brain has not processed it. It hasn't processed it. So it always becomes the goalpost. It always becomes the goalpost of your life. It's like that happened there. It always becomes the point, that the thing that you point to in your life and says, that happened to me there. This is where this person injured me. When that is happening, it means that you have not found meaning yet. You haven't found meaning yet. So you have to find a way to find meaning in that and use that to transcend, as opposed to just coping. All right. So here's what I want you to do. If you have a journal, you don't have to do this right here, but if you want, you can. We don't have much time. But what I want you to do is describe the injustices that you have endured. So you want to do the what happened and why this treatment was unfair. You want to talk about what happened, why it was unfair. You want to actually name it. You name it. You want to name it. You did this to me. I gave you everything. I sacrificed this to send you to school, and then you left after you graduated. Whatever it is, you want to say this, you want to name it, and say why it was unfair. The whole process is important. Name it and say why it was unfair. Okay. How have the injustices affected? How have the injustices affected you? So, oh, no, come back. How have the injustices affected you? Select any of the examples that apply and describe them in the box below. Obviously, you don't have this box, so you don't need a box to describe it. You just need whatever it is that you're writing on. And feel free to add something else that's not listed here. So what are some of the painful emotions that this injustice resulted in? Is it anger? Is it shame? How did it, and then how did it change your behavior? Is it avoiding other relationships? How has it changed your behavior? Is it not trusting people? And then the practical cost. How has this thing, what has it cost you practically? What does it cost you in terms of time, money? And how has it changed your worldview? How has it changed your worldview? How do you look at people because of this thing now? How are you looking at people? Do you think, like, let's say yours happened in a place of divorce? Do you now see all marriages as messed up? Do you all now just see the negative in everything? Well, how has it changed you? Are all white people bad and all Black people bad? How has this thing changed you, your worldview? And what is your cognitive rehearsal? We talk about a rumination, but what are your recurring thoughts about injustice now? What has that done for you? And were there any physical harm? Were you physically abused? What has that done? So painful emotions, changed behavior, practical cost, changed worldview, cognitive rehearsal, physical harm. And if you can think of anything else that's happened because of it, go ahead and list it. I want you in the chat box right now to define, in your own words, describe forgiveness. What does that look like? I'm not saying define it. I want you to describe it. What does forgiveness look like? What would forgiveness look like for you? You don't have to share with us, but if you can, go ahead and do it. Okay, I see that. To get your life back, freeing yourself, freedom, releasing the power that someone has over you. Excellent. Not remembering the hurt, feeling lighter. I like it. Yes, those are all really good ones. Absolutely. Taking back control. Excellent. Excellent. You know, all right. Okay, I like that. Inner peace. We all have inner peace, not remembering. You know, those are really good. You know, this is how we, you know, how we know we're in the place of forgiveness. How we know we're in a place of forgiveness. This is some of the things you guys are typing is how we know. Emotionally free from toxicity associated to unforgiveness. Absolutely. You know, to me, forgiveness looks like releasing poison, yeah, that can consume you and allowing yourself to move on, to be the director of your life instead of reacting to be an actor. So good, so good, so true. This is why we're here today. All right. Many people struggle with the decision to forgive because they know that they have that they have the right to be angry, while the offender does not have the right to kindness. Okay, making the decision to forgive means letting go of those resentments which you have every right to hold so you can heal. Yes, do you have a right to be angry? Yes, you do. You have a right to be angry. What was done was wrong. What was done to you was egregious. You do have the right. And do they have a right to your kindness? No, they don't. No, they don't. Because what they did was wrong. However, if I stay with that, I will still be hooked up to them, to my perpetrator forever. In order to unhook myself, I have to do the opposite. I have to let go of my anger and extend compassion towards them. This is how we heal people. So for the person who, for the person who wronged you or the people, what are your pros and cons of forgiveness? What are the pros and cons of deciding to forgive that person? If I forgive them, this, and if I forgive them, what are the cons? Write those down. And here's a miracle question. Whether or not you've made the decision to forgive, describe how things might be different if you decide to do so. I want you to do this. If I decide to forgive, the way that I have learned to do in this class, this is how my life will be different. You write that down, put it on your screen, put it somewhere where you can see it. And one day I want you to move towards that. If not today, someday. That's where you want to be, because that's the real you talking. That's your real, that's not the trauma talking. That's the person inside you that wants to be healed that's talking. Because sometimes what we have are trauma responses, and we think we're the ones making those responses. No, it's not you making those responses. It's the trauma that's in action. We don't want that. We need to silence. Oops, what are we doing here? We need to silence the trauma. I mean, the trauma responses. All right. And in this phase, when you get to the work phase, like I told you, is learn to understand the offender, to see them as more than their wrongdoing, because no one person is 100% evil unless they are evil itself. And we all have tendencies to injure. So think of it how you would want someone to extend pardon to you when you offend them. What was life like for the offender as they grew up? These are some of the questions you want to ask. Maybe this impacted their behavior. I see this with husbands and wives a lot. You know, sometimes we're drawn together because of trauma bonding, and then we can sustain that, and that same trauma keeps us apart in relationships. And when that's so, you have to think about their context. You know, how are they experiencing you? How are they experiencing, how was their life before you? Those are things that might have impacted them. And then I have the editor says, list the feelings. And I'll send you this, I don't know, Binky, I don't know, we send them the PowerPoint?
Yes, Annie suggested that we can put in the family coaching thingy in the PowerPoint and send it out.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So list the feelings you currently have towards the offender. If, you know, don't bypass the steps. I'm telling you, I've seen it work over and over and over and over, because what we usually do is, oh, I've forgiven them, but you never go through the process. We want to not only cognitively forgive, we want to emotionally forgive. So go through the process. Don't say, I don't want to. The very process of writing things down is healing, and it's clarifying. So write things down. Go through the process, please. And these are some follow-up questions for you. Did you list any positive feelings towards the offender? If so, describe them. If not, describe how your negative feelings have changed over time. Are they lessened in any way? And this one is about finding meaning. How can you change that hurt and transform it into something else? How can you change that hurt and transform it into something else? So that didn't work. Then am I going to get stuck there? Or am I going to transform, become somebody new, somebody better, like a metamorphosis, you know, like the caterpillar changing into a butterfly? You know, how am I going to find meaning and transform my life so that the hurt doesn't become the point, the goalpost in my life, but the transformation becomes where I'm going? Now, there's some other questions I put about what you can do. Describe how you have gotten, how you have grown because of the injustice you endured. This is part of the transformation. How has your world view changed? Are you stronger? That's where I want you to be. All right. And some of the resources, some of this are from my my book on forgiveness, which I should probably type out. It's called Forgiveness, Secrets of the Sages. So now I will take your questions. Feel free now. I know if you want to stay on, go ahead and stay. If you have any question now, feel free to. I'm going to also, we didn't record that portion. Oops. Hopefully we recorded it online on YouTube. All right.
Yes, we're live on YouTube, but I forgot to hit the play button on the cloud.
Okay, so now we're going to turn it off, and this will just be us in terms of questions and answers. Okay, so we're not going to record that. So there we go. Bims, can we end YouTube?
I've turned off the cloud recording. So should I stop the streaming as well?
Yes, please.